I guess that means everyone else is an Untermensch. So what is Ted Kennedy's actual legacy is the question. Is there anybody who has anything to say about this, positive, negative? You can call, because no one's all of one thing. Let's be clear. As I say, just because he cheated at Harvard and got thrown out, just because he killed a young lady and ran away and didn't discover he killed a lady until the next day, just because he destroyed America through massive immigration fraud, which has given the Democrats a perennial foot up in the elections, just because he gave us various acts which, of course, have undermined the taxpayer in this country, does not make him all bad. In fact, to the Ubermensch, it makes them all good. But there's something you should ask yourself. Why is it that a man of privilege with so much money is so in favor of doing things for the poor and underprivileged? Do you think it is out of altruism, or do you think that there's something to be gained from it? Why is it that Nancy Pelosi, amongst the richest women in Congress, why is she so concerned about the rights of illegal aliens who are not citizens? And let's go to the next step. Why, it seems to me, I ask this question over and over again because I can't put two and two together. I'm not an Obermensch, after all. I'm only a talk show host, merely a shock jock, so I don't have their intelligence nor their background. I realize some of them even went to college, and although I have a real PhD and have written over 25 books, it doesn't really count. And the reason it doesn't really count is because historians like Doris Kearns Goodwin say that only the Obermenschen's degrees and such account. So my work doesn't count. But I still ask these questions, even though I have the inability to figure them out. Why are the richest people in Congress liberal Democrats, and why are they always giving benefits to illegal aliens, the homeless, junkies, and other basic, let us say, well, let's just leave it at that. We'll pause at that point. That's a good question. But what's Kennedy's legacy is the issue. I realize we're not allowed to talk about it, and it's in bad taste to do so, but you must forgive us, those of us who are not Ubermensch, because Ubermensch play by certain rules. The rest of us don't. You have to be someone from a noble background. Now, although my father was not a rum runner, and although my father did not make his fortune by bringing in whiskey from England, and although my father was not an ambassador to England, and although my father did not do business with Hitler, I have trouble because of those things. Had my father been a rum runner, and had my father been a cohort of Adolf Hitler in the 1930s, and things of that nature, perhaps I would see the world through the eyes of an Ubermensch, and I wouldn't ask such impolite questions at a very sensitive time such as this in American history. But because I'm not of such an esteemed background as that, I am an immigrant son after all, and we all worked so very hard. That's all we know how to do, is work and try to do the right thing, and that's why we're not Ubermenschen. Ubermenschen play by different rules than we do. And so forgive me for these impolite questions at this delicate time in America's mourning period, where onions are being put in handkerchiefs across the halls of Congress right now. I hear that there's a big sale of onions now amongst aides to put in handkerchiefs around the halls of Congress. Georgia, GL, you're on the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, sir. If anybody else would have put an automobile off a bridge and killed somebody, there'd been a lot more questions.
Well, he didn't just... Now, look, again, I'm not an Obermensch, so I'm allowed to ask these questions and make these statements. But it's a very indelicate thing to point out, but he actually ran away from the scene of the accident and let the girl drown in the car.
Well, he had to ask his minions what to say.
Well, he came back the next day with his public relations agent and his lawyers. At that point, Mary Jo was dead. A state trooper gave a sworn statement the next day saying if they had known about the accident and had been able to get there within 25 minutes, they might have been able to save her. You see that? But you see, I think the way I don't think the way an Overmensch does. An Overmensch thinks only of himself, because the family name must be preserved and future political, let us say, aspirations must be preserved. I mean, look, if you want to break an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. She was just an egg in the wrong car. And who is she? No one ever heard of her. So therefore, what does it really matter? Look at the good he's gone on to do. You wouldn't have wanted any of that stopped, would you? And what about being thrown out of Harvard for having hired a poor kid to take his exams for him? Now, it's true he was caught and thrown out of Harvard, but what you don't know is that he was let back into Harvard with a little help from his friends. But the poor kid who took his exams never went back to Harvard. Lucky him. Or else he'd be another idiot who graduated Harvard and couldn't make a living. and how to sit in pajamas and send emails to people. So if you care to talk about this amongst ourselves, we can do it. I'm sure the Ubermenschen are not listening. After all, I don't exist and the show doesn't exist, so we're sort of free to talk amongst ourselves. We're the impolite non-Ubermensch of America. The Ubermensch are right now wringing onions inside handkerchiefs, seeing if they can exploit this, let us say, what's the word that he used, that Rahm Emanuel character from Chicago? Never miss a crisis to try to advance the agenda? Well, we know what that means. Us little people know what that means. This is a crisis that they're going to use to try to advance socialized medicine, all in the name of the Obermensch.
Savage.
Streaming at 910knew.com. This is the Savage Nation on Talk 910 KNEW. Obama is silent during his vacation, as is the press corps, because he needs a good rest. He's done such good work so far, bailing out Goldman Sachs and things of that nature, and not prosecuting individuals who were, let's say, in the crosshairs of the federal government for having done weird things, and people who should be in the crosshairs of the federal government, they haven't been targeted because he's done such good work in such a short period of time. He deserves a good quiet rest on Martha's Vineyard. As I say, if we still had investigative reporting, a young reporter would be out there with a pencil and a pad writing down the tail numbers of the jets that are flying in and out of Martha's Vineyard. That's assuming they have a jet port. I've not been there myself. It's reserved only for the Obermensch and the maids and the gardeners who work on the Obermensch's estates. But they must have a jet port. And I would imagine that if you wrote down the tail numbers of the jets flying in and out of Martha's Vineyard, while the great one is there, you could probably figure out who's doing a deal or two. And I don't think that they should have to come by train or by, let us say, ferry or anything like that, because those are the Obermensch. They need efficiency, and time is money to them. And you shouldn't worry about whose tail number has landed and whose tail is being tucked on Martha's Vineyard, so to speak. The important thing is to make certain that the president is given quiet time with his family. No, you just harassed poor George Bush for chopping wood at Crawford for 8 straight years. I noticed that Glenn Beck, while crying last night, scored top ratings. My hat's off to you, Glenn, crying about the First Amendment and having the golfer on with you. Good job. I got a kick out of it while enjoying a cocktail last night. Nice performance, Glenn. Crying about losing everything because of the First Amendment and how you prefer free speech with blowhard Rushy the blowhard. The two of you discovered that there's a free speech issue. Really? Well, I, as the first victim of McCarthyism in America in this period, of course. Now, the liberals talk about McCarthyism as though it was horrible and real. Well, it wasn't actually horrible, but it was real. There was McCarthyism, but he actually did root out real communists who really were linked to the Soviet Union in the 1950s. But let's put aside the fact that to the left, McCarthyism is very real. But, of course, now that they're practicing McCarthyism here in the United States of America, it doesn't matter. Because what matters is who's pulling Charlie McCarthy's strings, not whether or not Charlie McCarthy is talking. But, Glenn, good job to you and Rush for talking about freedom of speech without talking about the number one freedom of speech issue in America today, which is Michael Savage having been banned in Britain. I got to hand it to you, Glenn. The ability to pull that off with crocodile tears, my hat's off to you, Glenn. Good entertainment. 1-800-449-8255. This is the Savage Nation. How do you feel about Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh going on television yesterday talking about how the Obama administration is out to get him and saying nothing about Michael Savage being banned in Britain? Does that bother you at all? Does it bother you at all to see the hypocrisy of the corporate talk show hosts Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh? Now, let me tell you something. There is a reason for all of this. I am syndicated by an independent syndicator who is not in any sense a major corporation. Maybe he will be one day. Maybe he knows them. But you see, Limbaugh and Beck are part of corporate talk. And whether you believe it or not, it doesn't really matter whether the corporate talk is left or right. There is a club. And corporate talk only talks about others within the corporate talk fraternity. And so although Michael Savage has been actually banned in Britain, although Michael Savage is actually the first victim of McCarthyism in this period, although Michael Savage is actually the first victim of such things, that didn't matter to Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh. What's important is what might happen to Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh, not what actually did happen to Michael Savage. And that's the beauty of it. The beauty is that they can get away with it because the people themselves don't even see the hypocrisy. And now you understand what corporate broadcasting is as opposed to independent broadcasting. So here I am. What would you like to talk about? Kennedy, this, that, the media, the double talk, vacations, Doug Brinkley referring to Ted Kennedy as a form of Ubermensch. How about a little montage of talking heads referring to the political greatness of Ted Kennedy? Let's hear 02.
The tributes are pouring in from around the world for Senator Kennedy. He has lost his battle with brain cancer. The man known as the Lion of the Senate passing away.
The greatest, I suppose, most prolific senator.